Chapter 19. A Clue from Groeszdawdi. Mrs. Kreutz quickly closed the door behind Nancy and Bess and said, "Please to forgive me for speaking in Pennsylvania Dutch to you. I was saying, hurry." "What's the matter?" Bess asked quickly. Manda's mother looked all around, as if afraid someone would hear her reply. In a whisper, she said, "I could not let you stay outdoors. Papa has come to believe you girls persuaded Manda to run away. He has told many people this. If he should drive in now, please run yourselves the front door out." Nancy felt that she should remind Mrs. Kreutz that the convertible parked outside was a dead giveaway. But before she could say a word, Mrs. Kreutz asked breathlessly, "Have you news of Manda?" "We were hoping she might have returned home," Nancy replied. "We haven't been able to find her." Mrs. Kreutz wrung her hands. "Oh, my little daughter," she wailed. "If it had not been for Papa saying no one could talk to her, she would be here now. I am so afraid she is in danger." The girls agreed with this, but did not voice their opinion. Instead, they assured Mrs. Kreutz that they were doing everything possible to find Manda. "The police are trying to find Mr. and Mrs. Holt, for whom we think Manda is working," Bess added. Nancy brought the girls' mother up to date on all that had happened, ending with the question. "The man on the street who spoke to Manda's cousin Melinda said, 'Get to the schnitz.' Have you any idea what he meant?" When Mrs. Kreutz said no, Nancy inquired if the woman had ever heard of a storehouse for dried apples in the neighborhood. At this remark, Mrs. Kreutz turned pale. Grasping Nancy's hand, she said, "Manda asked me that very question." "I believe that's where she's gone," Nancy said. "Where is the storehouse?" Sadly, the Amish woman admitted that she did not know. She had never heard of such a place. "If Manda was trying to find it," said Nancy, "where would she go to get information about it?" Mrs. Kreutz replied that there was one very old man in the neighborhood who might be able to help. "He knows about everything that took place long ago," she said. "I have never heard of any new storehouses, so this place must have been used years ago." "Who is this man, and where does he live?" Nancy asked eagerly. "He's Groeszdawdi Esh," Mrs. Kreutz answered. "He lives in one end of a 3-generation house." Bess wanted to know what this was, and Mrs. Kreutz explained that in Amish country families rarely separate. Sometimes a man will build a house on part of his property for a son about to be married. Other parents, she said, build a wing onto the main house, and the father and mother move into it when one of the sons marries. "And where does the third house come in?" Bess asked. Mrs. Kreutz said it was hard to explain this in English. Anyway, there were 3 houses attached, each smaller than the one beside it. In the smallest house lived the grandfather, in the center building was the father, and in the largest house was the grandson and his family. "Groeszdawdi Esh lives in the smallest house," she said. Pointing in a northwesterly direction, she added, "If you could fly like a crow, you would hit on it." "I'm sure we can find it," said Nancy. "And now we had better go before your husband returns." Mrs. Kreutz said yes. He had gone to a cow sale to sell the ugly bull which had attacked him, but he probably would be home any minute. The girls hurried outside, climbed into the car, and drove off. They found the Esh farm with little trouble. As they reached the barn, they were surprised to see a dozen Amish carriages assembled. "There must be a party going on," said Nancy. At that moment, a young boy, carrying a bucket of apple parings, came dashing from a small stone building. He dumped the contents of the pail into the pigsty. "I'll bet this is an apple schnitzing," Bess remarked. Realizing that Groeszdawdi, Esh, and everyone else on the farm would be in the kettle house, Nancy and Bess got out of the car and went directly there. "Doesn't it smell heavenly?" said Bess, as she sniffed the spicy aroma coming from the building. Nancy and Bess stepped inside and watched the busy scene with fascination. Seated on chairs and apple crates were several men and women, old and young. Each one held a metal box-shaped apple parer on his lap. It worked with a quick turn of the handle and took off the skin of the apple in a jiffy. Next, the fruit was cored and put into large kettles, which were lifted into a warm oven. Here, the moisture would be baked out of them. Several minutes passed before the girls were noticed. Then a young woman left her work and came over to ask if she could be of assistance to them. Nancy stated that she had come to talk to Groeszdawdi Esh. "I will get him," the woman offered. Presently, an elderly man with snow-white hair and beard approached them. He had kindly blue eyes, and despite his advanced age, was tall and erect. The old man smiled pleasantly at the visitors. "Groeszdawdi can help you?" he asked. Nancy explained that she was looking for a place known as the Schnitz, which she thought was an old-time dried apple storehouse. "Ach ja," the man said. "I know the place. A long time ago it belonged to a farmer named Holt." Nancy could hardly conceal her excitement. "Yes, go on," she urged. "The Holts have not lived there for a long time," Groeszdawdi went on. "They sold the place to city people named Fuller, but now they have abandoned it." "Why?" Bess spoke up. Groeszdawdi Esh looked first at one girl, then the other. "Before I tell you, explain why you want to know about it." Nancy wondered what was behind the elderly man's question, but she replied that Manda Kreutz was missing and that she had a clue Manda might be hiding at the Schnitz. "Gefährlich! Es ist wie tot!" The girls waited for Mr. Esh to translate. In a moment he did. "It's dangerous. It's like death." He went on to say that if Manda were there, she too might vanish mysteriously, as many others had on that farm. "But why?" cried Nancy. "Tell us so that we can save her." Groeszdawdi Esh shook his head and wagged a finger at the girls. "Stay away from that spot. It is bad luck. Very bad luck." End of chapter 19.